You're watching KTN News Desk, and my name is Akisa Wandera. We begin this second hour of the bulletin with a focus on the undercover investigation that has blown the lid off the workings of Cambridge Analytica, the British data company that was suspected and now boasts of influencing Kenya's 2017 presidential election. Cambridge Analytica bosses were apparently caught on camera, boasting of the control they had exerted in Kenya. The company denies any wrongdoing, and Kenyatta's Jubilee party has downplayed the impact of the group, saying they only employed the Cambridge Analytica not to really influence the Kenyan election, and they're saying that they employed the company's parent company, SCL, to help with branding, and that was just about it. Of course, we have had a lot of views from Kenyans on social media and beyond on this particular conversation. The second part of this particular expose is already out. The third part is being expected. But I want now to have a conversation with Norman Magaya. He's the CEO of NASA. Norman, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to have you here on KTN News Desk. Your reaction to this expose, for starters?
I think this expose just vindicates what we stated before the August elections and the events after the nullification of the election by the Supreme Court. One thing it demonstrates that in the previous elections, what we had was elections being rigged manually. But there was a bit of sophistication in the manner in which the 2017 elections were conducted and manipulated. And the level of sophistication is very clear that it will not have been done by Jubilee and its agents alone. And that's where Cambridge Analytica comes in. And if you look at the reaction of Jubilee, it raises more questions than the answers they are providing, because you cannot hire a company and pay all those millions purely for branding purposes. Then skilled Kenyans here will do branding better than any foreign company. So the work of Cambridge Analytica really was, one, to drive political propaganda, to hype on the emotions and fears of Kenyans by accessing data through social media and drive fear in them. And this they had done to great effect during the Brexit poll. I think that's where they gained their notorious reputation of being able to use data to drive election perceptions. And so what you said is that there must be full disclosure on the role that Cambridge Analytica played in the Kenyan election in 2017. And that where there's criminal culpability, those who are culpable must be prosecuted. And that includes the hirers, which is the Jubilee Party, the people who hired Cambridge Analytica, Cambridge Analytica itself, and the people they colluded with at the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. And the reason why we extend to IEBC is because if you look at that expose, their role does not just stop at driving propaganda and perceptions. It also entails hacking of systems. And that is what happened on the 8th of August.
All right. So full disclosure and investigation. I'm getting back to you shortly. I want us to take a look at a bite there before we get back to the conversation here with the NASA CEO, Norman Magaya. Let's take a look at that.
We were approached by a very respectable academic who said that he had the wherewithal, the legitimate and legal wherewithal, to collect data on Facebook users that we might be able to use in part of our modelling. And we entered into a contract with this individual to undertake a large-scale piece of research for our company. And that involved going out and asking somewhere close to 40,000 individuals to undertake a survey, a bit like an opinion survey. And as part of that survey, the individuals consented to give up some of their data to this academic, Dr. Kogan, and also some data on some of their friends. Now, this work was undertaken by Dr. Kogan in its entirety, and he simply delivered to us the model derivatives of these data that he collected. And we then looked at how we could build models on top of these models to understand whether that would give us any insight or any signal into the...
And in one of their recent overseas campaigns, there was no shortage of emotion. In last year's chaotic and at times violent Kenyan elections, the company worked secretly for the incumbent President Uhuru Kenyatta. The campaign was marked by misinformation. Fake news spread through the internet and smartphones. In one survey, 90% of Kenyans said they'd heard or seen false stories about the election. Apocalyptic videos like this, smearing Kenyatta's opponent, Raila Odinga, went viral in the toxic political atmosphere. This one appears to target specific fears: health, infrastructure, the terror threat, and was heavily promoted on social media and Google. But no one in Kenya seemingly knew who was behind it. Cambridge Analytica strenuously deny any involvement with these videos or any role in negative political campaigning there. In public, they've said little about their recent involvement in Kenya, but in private, it's a source of evident pride.
The Kenyatta campaign, which we ran in 2013 and 2017 for Kenyatta.
And what you have done in the Kenya?
We have rebranded the entire party twice, written their manifesto, done 2 rounds of 50,000 surveys.
Huge amounts of research, analysis, messaging.
And then we'd write all the speeches and we'd stage the whole thing. So.
Right, that's just a snippet of that particular expose that ran on Channel 4 News in Britain, and of course extensively also talking about the role of Cambridge Analytica in various elections, and especially here in Kenya last year. Norman Magai here, the NASA CEO, says that they want full disclosure and investigation into what happened. Some of the things that Cambridge Analytica did were not illegal. Being a very formidable lawyer, where do you think some of the illegalities were in what they did in the country?
One, I think you've seen in some of the election petitions that were filed before the High Court, we've had elections nullified on the basis that the winning candidates employed propaganda to win the election, to besmirch their opponents and all that. So that is already an established election offense, propaganda. Access to data on Facebook. This was illegally obtained by Cambridge Analytica, of course, with the connivance of Facebook. And so that is another area. The third area is with regard to improper access to electoral systems at the IEBC. And this is confirmed, one, by the findings of the Supreme Court on the illegalities that were committed. The IEBC refused to allow access to its servers because it knew very clear that they were tampered with, that there was illegal access, there was illegal tampering of election results. And this is sophistication that has not been there in Kenyan elections. This is where Cambridge Analytica came into the risk of Jubilee. That even after running the propaganda was not sufficient to win them an election. And so they resorted to a process of manipulating the election results. And what we've done is established a 5-man legal team to go through these exposes, compare it with our own findings that we have so far established. Remember that we did an extensive study of the electronic results transmission system between August and December last year with our IT team. So we're having the two teams to sit together and find out the fault lines and how all this manipulation was done, with a view that they will be able to present a report by the end of the week that will form the basis of what legal action we undertake. We also hope that the UK and US ambassador finally can wake up to this reality and apologize to Kenyans. These are issues we raised with them. We wrote to them, the EU observer missions, we wrote to them about the role of Cambridge Analytica in the Kenyan election. A country that was just emerging on the preface of violent ethnic related tensions cannot sustain a propaganda that is being sponsored by a candidate who is the sitting president, okay? And that posed danger to the coming generations, that the divisions that have been sowed in this country. And you can see even that's why there is disquiet despite the apparent camaraderie between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, there are still so many doubts as to whether this is sufficient to heal the country. And this is informed by the damage that had been done by Cambridge Analytica in planting seeds of discords in the minds of Kenyans.
Let me take you a few steps back. Is there likelihood we would see this back in court, because you say you have a legal team that's putting things together with the extensive research you've done on this?
Definitely. Definitely, even before Cambridge Analytica came out with this expose, it was always our decision that we have to test our findings before a court of law. We have a list of individuals, both in the Electoral Commission and Jubilee, that we think were culpable in these maneuvers, that we think should stand trial before a court of law, as a way of ensuring that in the next election, we do not encounter the unfortunate events that we encountered in the 2017 elections, that we should have a flawless election where candidates know the results within 24 or 48 hours. Winners are congratulated, and those who have lost concede. So yes, we definitely are going to go to court, both civil and criminal.
Yeah.
Yes.
From what you say, it seems like the journey or the fight for electoral justice is completely on. But from what has been seen, especially on the public platform, Kenyans seem to get the feeling that the fight for electoral justice is slowly dying down because of the seeming disintegration in NASA. Is it still on?
Whatever happens in NASA cannot take our eyes off the goal. And our goal is to ensure that we have, and if there is one thing that strikes a chord in the entire NASA fraternity, is the question of electoral justice. And that's why we've said that we cannot talk about 2022 unless we deal with the ghosts of the 2017 elections. Even if you look at the memorandum that Uhuru and Raila signed, it clearly talks to the question of divisive elections. And at the core of it is the question of electoral justice that we must be able to confront, deal with before we can look forward with the hope to the next election. So, and what has been happening in NASA has no ability to affect the internal mechanizations in which the coalition treats these issues. Most of them are being handled by technical teams, and all principals speak to it. And what we're having is mere jostling and the hangover of the events of 30th that cannot shake the coalition. Yeah.
Then you also talk about having, especially the ambassadors and the foreign envoys, apologize to Kenyans. Do you think that will be enough? From where you sit as a CEO of NASA, do you think that would be enough?
They at least must own up, because you remember even before the repeat election of October 26th, despite the chairman of the commission saying I am unable to conduct a free and fair election, the ambassador still came up at Radisson Blue Hotel to issue a statement to say that the commission is ready. And this was after we had made a presentation to a joint sitting of those ambassadors to demonstrate to him how the process had been manipulated. But they were so determined to defend the ills that were being done by the likes of Cambridge Analytica that it didn't matter whatever amount of evidence you presented to him. They were never persuaded. But now it's good that this is coming out from their own media, from their own countries. And remember that there were 3 critical companies that participated in the Kenyan election. One is Cambridge Analytica, which is a UK company, registered in the UK, but also incorporated and operates in the US. We had OT Morpho, that is registered in France. Then we have NTT, that is an US incorporated company. And all of them played a critical role in manipulating the Kenyan election. To date, none of them can present an honest inventory of the events of 2017. And all these ambassadors were aware of this, because once your company trades or is conducting business of a national nature in a friendly country, it behooves the officials of the mother state to inform the citizens of the country where this company is conducting business as to the reputation of this company, as to the integrity of this company. And you can see that's why the expose on Cambridge Analytica is a big issue in the UK, because there is reason to believe that they were behind the manipulation of the election results on the referendum on Brexit. And that's why Britons are very bitter and they want to get to the bottom of this. And I think Kenyans must also be enraged enough to say that we must get to the bottom of this as a way of putting a closure to the events of 2017.
But Jubilee says they're not denying that they had Cambridge Analytica, but they're saying they only had them for purposes of branding and strategic communication during the election.
I don't think anybody will pay that amount of money that Jubilee has paid Cambridge Analytica over a cycle of 2 elections purely to do branding as they are putting it. Actually, as I've said, it just raises more questions than answers. And Jubilee is just being economical with the truth. I think they just must own up that they employed a company that helped them to manipulate the systems, to manipulate perceptions, to get an unfair advantage on the electoral contest. It's something they should simply own up, because the officials of Cambridge Analytica themselves have said the extent to which they participated in the election. So it cannot be that the right hand does not know what the left hand is doing. These people are retained by Jubilee. It's Jubilee that gives them the terms of reference. And if Jubilee is candid enough, they signed a contract with the Cambridge Analytica. Let them make that contract public. Okay. From that contract, we will know what was the mandate of Cambridge Analytica in the Jubilee campaign. If they are honest enough, we dare them to make that contract public because they entered into an official contract. I want us
to wrap up, but quickly, just before I let you go, these are questions that so many Kenyans are asking, even on the social media platform. An investigation into this particular expose, full disclosure, then what? Bearing in mind the kind of protracted election period Kenyans had, then what?
I think if we want to do justice to this country, then the events of the elections of 2017 and its entire cost, both on the economy and the social welfare of Kenyans, we must find a way of putting closure to this. And I think the only way to do this is to conduct a full audit and inquiry into the entire 2017 elections. It is only after we know the truth that we will know how to approach the next election. If we don't have that probe, we will go with the lingering suspicions, with the lingering questions. There will be no trust even in the ability of the Electoral Commission to conduct any election. As it is now, if you called an election today, we will still do what we did in October 26. We will not participate in that election as long as we still have those systems in place. So we must be clear enough, and I hope that this memorandum that Raila and Uhuru have signed, it clearly speaks to the question of divisive elections and at the core of it, electoral justice. I hope that Uhuru can be courageous enough to allow the establishment of a proper audit of the 2017 elections. Okay. Because he will not be a candidate in the next election. And if he wants to put a closure to the 2017 elections and allow the country to move on, then we should have that probe.
Okay, thank you very much for speaking to us here on KTN News Desk. Always a pleasure to have you here. Norman Magaya is the CEO of the National Super Alliance, just speaking to us about what they think as the opposition about the expose on Cambridge Analytica and the role they played in the Kenyan election last year and in 2013. Now, Cambridge Analytica has also suspended Chief Executive Officer Alexander Nix after the executive was caught on camera boasting about the firm's willingness to use bribes, entrapment, and sex workers and other possibly and other ways of influencing the election or undermining the political candidates. The UK-based political advertising firms board said on Tuesday that Nix's suspension is pending an investigation into his comments, which are airing this week after a 4-month-long undercover operation by Channel 4 News and other allegations surrounding the firm.
We were approached by a very respectable academic who said that he had the wherewithal, the legitimate and legal wherewithal, to collect data on Facebook users that we might be able to use in part of our modelling. And we entered into a contract with this individual to undertake a large-scale piece of research for our company. And that involved going out and asking somewhere close to 40,000 individuals to undertake a survey, a bit like an opinion survey. And as part of that survey, the individuals consented to give up some of their data to this academic, Dr. Kogan, and also some data on some of their friends. Now, this work was undertaken by Dr. Kogan in its entirety, and he simply delivered to us the model derivatives of these data that he collected. And we then looked at how we could build models on top of these models to understand whether that would give us any insight or any signal into these audiences.
People are being targeted with information in a way that we've never seen before, with increasing sophistication, and that is what the model of companies like Cambridge Analytica are all about. And people that followed Channel 4's investigation last night may well question the ethics of that company based on what they've seen, and they may certainly say they wouldn't want their data to end up in the hands of people like that. Well, we want to know why it was they acquired these 50 million profiles of Facebook users and their data, and why, when we asked them about this in front of the Select Committee, they denied they'd received this information. This ultimately is about people's private data. They would have had no idea that it was being harvested in the way it was, and certainly no idea that it ended up in the hands of a company like Cambridge Analytica.
All right, we take a short break here on KTN.